So in straight life sciences companies, often the companies are funded at this early stage via SBIR grants. And sometimes they start off with 50,000, sometimes they have 150,000, and they have this 6-month period, and they go to the next level. And this is something that we're completely used to doing on the life sciences side, is really matching those grants. My observation with a lot of the folks on the digital health side is they're not used to writing grants, because they come from a different background, whereas all the folks starting the life sciences companies have been writing grants for years by then because they've been funding their research in the organizations. And that's a key difference. So, so I did 2 investments last year. One investment was in life sciences and one was a health IT. The life sciences company, similar amounts of money in both cases. The life sciences company has doubled that with grants in the last year, and it's just a different perspective.
They probably don't know about it.
Yeah,
but I think it's more than that, because in life science, it's usually you're started by a scientist, you have a very strong affiliation with very credible, academic centers like UCSF and all of that. And my experience, having done a lot of grants, is that unless you have these primary investigators who are in the network on getting grants and have a track record and come to an institution as a 50% overhead, by the way, in doing those grants being brought into the institution, that usually is not the case in healthcare IT or digital health, because usually you don't have a strong founder that's an MD, PhD with 25 years of getting grants. It's usually not affiliated with an academic center yet, because we're still trying to figure out the value proposition. And one of the challenges, and I talked to Todd Park about that, is that we should take a piece of the NIH money, so I'm making my bid here, so that we can give a grant to people like you when they have an idea, so you could bring it to a hospital, so you could bring it to a clinic, and you could do the validation, and you could do the quantification. And right now it's impossible to get that money. And so I've been talking to the Moore Foundations and California Healthcare Foundation to really help give grants which are non-dilutive to companies. The challenge is that they will only do that after the company has had some capital inside. So there's a bit of a chicken and egg problem here.
But there is a network effect. So a lot of the digital health entrepreneurs can go and talk to their end customers, which are the hospitals which have the MDs in them, who often with the research institutions are used to writing grants, and that's just an avenue, I'd say, for companies coming out of Rock Health. Go get those relationships.
We've had, one of our entrepreneurs sitting right here, Ryan, with Pipette, is actually co-authoring a grant with one of our medical partners to cover the cost of the clinical trial. And I'll say we've had workshops at Rock Health about this non-dilutive funding, because it's really excellent and everybody should look into it. And while you might not have experience writing grants, there are actually consultants for a couple $100s that will write these grants for you. I would make sure you do your due diligence on them, make sure they understand both how to successfully write a grant and also understand your technology. But there's a tremendous amount of money, and I think that from what we've heard from entrepreneurs who have been successful from the digital health space getting these grants is that the NIH is actually really excited about these new, it's like refreshing to see new ideas that are using technology, so you might have a little bit of an advantage because it's less competitive for technology-driven companies.
And just to add to, again, what Simi mentioned last, don't be afraid of the government, honestly. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. You're not used to writing grants, but it's not as scary as you think it is. You may have to talk to some people, look at examples of grants, but all of the information that's going to be in that grant application is stuff you should know wherever you're raising money.
Yeah. Well, I will say one thing, though, you can bring back to your colleagues. I think it's 9 months till you hear back from them. So Rowan, when you decide, when you hear a pitch and you're going to invest, what's the time period there?
What's the time period there? It depends on the entrepreneur.
The same day of the partner meetings in some cases.
As with all things, it depends on the entrepreneur and who else you're doing this with, and whether you're in a competitive situation or not.
But it's less than 9 months.
Yeah,
so that is something that's tricky.
So this is the other thing that
it is less than 9 months.
Yeah, I mean that is one of the hesitations also, I'm sure, about applying for these grants. But at the same time, if you're early enough and you keep going at it, and granted the investment in time. Also in learning how to write one of these, which again, you guys are entrepreneurs, you're fearless, go for it. But having to think about whether you're going to spend time developing versus time going to talk to VCs or angels versus trying to write a grant, it's definitely a delicate balance, and whether that payoff, what that payoff will be.
Are there sources of government funding like the CMS innovation grants
So I think I recommend everybody to go. There's a lot of nonprofit foundation. California Healthcare Foundation is focusing on the underserved in the California area. You have the Gordon Moore Foundation is also doing some grants area there. You have the Kaufman. There's a lot of foundations for the country. In addition to that, you have the disease-related foundations. And a lot of those are really trying to get the patient more engaged because 80% of the cost of healthcare is really related to chronic disease management, i.e. change of behavior. And so there's a lot of the people there who are probably more willing to give you a small grant just to see if you do anything with it. Then it allows, we have a relationship with the angels, it allows the angels, the ecosystem there, that we can work with them to get more grants to do implementations. The one area that they're really good at is to do a grant to a hospitals or to a clinics or to a provider as opposed to give money to a company. And very often what company needs to do is to do a before and after. What was the environment before? Now you have your new product and application. Well, where does it fit? What do you do? And you need to quantify and measure that versus they like it or not. Yeah. And so I think those people, and I think the NIH is forcing you to think that way, which is, how do you measure the impact of your product?
Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd like to add about grants is once you get really good at writing them, then you have to figure out, is this directly within my focus area? Because that's the kind of pros and cons. So sometimes the foundations you're writing a grant for have particular ideas. And if it's on your critical path, go write the grant, take the money. If it's not on your critical path, you should think very carefully about it because of distraction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is the funding environment easier for consumer dedicated companies, payer dedicated companies, or provider?
So actually, we did a study of all of the venture-backed companies in 2011 in this space. In 2011, I think there were 60 that received more than $2 million that we would define as digital health, and the majority were enterprise. So the majority were not the consumer products; they were the ones that were going to integrate into.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and for me, there's two big buckets. There is how can we help the $2.6 trillion being spent every year to be more cost efficient. And so if you have really done your homework and you have identified the pain points, the value proposition says, does it work and do you save money? It's very straightforward. And then you have the pain of selling it to hospitals and providers or enterprise systems. The problem on the consumer side is that nobody knows the roadmap. Nobody knows where's the market, will they pay, is that somebody else in the user, and nobody knows. So there's a lot of activities there. We see a lot of startups there. But there's a very high uncertainty as far as, can you get traffic, but can you monetize that? And I think that's kind of the challenge. So
for the direct-to-consumer?
For the direct-to-consumer. It's easier to deploy. With 100K, you probably can get an application out there and then see if they're coming. The problem is that to conquer this market, this famous dog who raised $70 million, that's $700 million valuation there, it takes a lot of money afterwards. Where I think on the productivity side, you could really get something quickly into somebody's hands, start measuring it, and then it's easier, I think, to go to people with healthcare and technology experience to say it's just a question of suffering it and scaling it up.